We all know that writers can actually be toxic. We know this. This one is not a new discovery. But I think there are, over the years, I have interacted with the indie author scene, right? Indie authors, there's a lot of them. And the new development in Amazon and in the capacity for people to actually self-publish has resulted in an explosion, a revolution in book publishing. There are now hybrid authors, they are as dime a das, and so big profile ones recently are like Brandon Sanderson, right? Exactly. So fundamentally speaking, I have a long history with indie authors. But step number 2, because of that history, because of having read their books, interacted with them, because of having actually helped them, seen them, talked to them, developed with them, I have come to, over the years, observe certain toxic traits that indie authors have. So indie authors can absolutely be toxic. And I mean really, really, really toxic. So how? Or what makes them toxic? What are the certain worst mistakes and traits that they seem to exhibit? This crowd of people, the indie authors, and how to fix those things. So let's talk about the first problem. We're just gonna delve into it. I don't want to waste your time. So the first problem with indie authors is that they build a lot on survivorship bias. Whenever you talk to them about how, because you see, statistically speaking, the reality of any self-published book is that it's not gonna sell a lot. It maybe sell 20, 50, 100 copies. If it's a stunning success, it's going to sell 3,000-4,000 copies, enough to be bought by a big publisher. For example, The Rage of Dragons is a particularly famous book that I read a year back. Exactly. There's many books like this that have actually become successful as self-published book, and then they got traditionally published. Essentially, that is one of the things that happens. And so we know that realistically speaking, self-published books don't sell a lot. Independent authors do not really sell a lot. A new sold copy is a huge success. Like for a day, if you sell one additional book, that is a huge stunning success. This is a reality down in the field. It's a reality down in the mud. A traditionally published book is going to sell 3, 4, 5,000 copies on average a lot of the time. And this is, by the way, if it's like non-fiction, or if it's going to be literary fiction, genre fiction, romance, fantasy, mystery, thriller books. These actually go on, sci-fi even, these actually go on to sell more than that on average. And these are averages, right? Yeah. And so the power of a platform, a publisher platform, right, is remarkably important. And so the reality is self-published books just don't sell much. They don't sell as much as a lot of people seem to think they should do. And authors oftentimes go in that direction in order to actually make more money. Right? But then the reality is there'll be very small amounts of money. You'll have a greater share. No worry. You'll have 70%, 60%, 50%, if not 40% of what comes out of the books. But there's not going to be a lot. Right? Yes. So a self-published route or a self-publishing route is most beneficial for those people who have a large platform. But then that's what you would call survivorship bias. For every million people that self-publish, a minority, remarkably smaller minority compared to like traditional publishing, are going to become large successes, stunning successes. And I know this sounds harsh. I know this sounds even like I'm being an a-hole, right? I know like I'm being mean, but I'm really not. I hope you don't take it that way. Because here's the thing, right? You cannot build a philosophy or like changing your life's path on a survivorship bias. Right? The next, that's a toxic trait, by the way. It's a remarkably toxic trait. I'm going to start a music career and I'm going to become very successful. And I know this because I heard a guy who abandoned everything, and then that guy is now famous and is loved by everyone. No, there's 100,000 guys behind that guy that are dead, that have not, it didn't pan out, it didn't work out. Yes. So build your expectations on realistically achievable, sustainable goals. So what I'm suggesting is the toxic trait here is that a lot of people that are self-publishing have survivorship bias at the core of why they are doing this. They hope to become that success and they hope to make that money. go ahead, I suppose, but maybe you should actually slow down a little bit. Maybe you should consider sustainability, all right? Something that is actually realistic, achievable, right? Yeah. But another toxic trait that we're going to talk about today, that self-published writers happen to have, that independent authors happen to have, is going to be the hate for gatekeepers. They have built a narrative around why do they self-publish. I want to make more money, I want to take a greater share, right? Exactly, which they do. Of the sales that you make more money from it relative to a traditional published author. But then there's hatred for gatekeepers. I want to keep my creative control. And that's fine, right? Exactly. Gatekeepers can actually be toxic. Who are the gatekeepers? They're not actually mysterious. The editor of a publishing house actually decides a lot, all right? The marketing experts in a particular publishing house, they'll determine the advance of your book, they'll determine how much your book is going to sell, and they'll determine how much the publisher should invest in your book. Exactly. The agent is going to determine whether you are actually publishable, whether this book could actually go the whole distance, because they have to decide, because remember, an agent makes money 15% on every time they make a commission successful. So a book makes it to publication, they make the total 15% of the total advance. This is remarkably important, and the royalties, right? This is remarkably important. So they're interested to know if your book is gonna sell. All of these people come together in order to actually be, like the gatekeepers you have to go through. Okay, these are the gatekeepers you have to go through, and they do control creativity. So they oftentimes pick certain books, and that is toxic. I agree that gatekeepers are awful. However, you cannot realistically look me in the face and tell me that gatekeepers are entirely defunct and that they are not, most of the time, beneficial to the book and to the writer and to the work that is being published. Because most self-published books are not in a quality high enough on average to compete with traditional published books. This is because an editor says this and that at a particular publishing house. That editor actually has understanding of the craft. They've been doing this for a very long time. And for you to really disregard what they said is a remarkably big mistake. It's a significant, gargantuan mistake. Can't be making those kinds of mistakes, can you? Exactly. And so what this means is, you have to understand that gatekeepers are not all bad. Everything they do is not there as an obstacle to the writer. They are actually there to oftentimes, most of the time, enhance the writer. If they have concerns about the creative direction, they'll tell you. They'll be sure to let you know, but they'll be oftentimes sure to let you know in a way that is constructive, meaning, hey, this book is too dark, or this book has too much of this and this and this, and it can really be remarkably damaging for the sales, or this book, does not really fit the market, or it doesn't seem to have a target audience. It's a confused book. It's trying to do too many things in a genre that is oftentimes one theme. Yeah, so those are particularly viable, realistic concerns about a genre, about a publishing house, exactly, about the business of publishing books. You have to consider these things. These are not figments that you can skip. And you should not convince yourself that gatekeepers are the ultimate villains. Independent authors have developed this story. There are these cabals, it's like QAnon. At this point, it's remarkably toxic. It's really remarkably toxic. There is no one that is out to get you as a writer. You are not writing the next Marvel script. There are no hundreds of millions of dollars involved. You're writing a book, and in a book, you will most of the time have like 300, 400,000 involved. And the publisher could easily lose that money and still recover it on one big success. So you are not going to bankrupt the publishing house. This is why novelists have a lot more creative control and a lot more freedom and have a lot less strict rules compared to screenwriters. Good luck being a screenwriter if you used to be a novelist, because you're going to really hate your life. Like George R. R. Martin, the author of A Song of Ice and Fire, became a screenwriter. Then he actually ran away. He ran back to being a novelist. See, it's just, the gatekeepers are not as awful as they're made out to be. And then let's talk about another thing, right? Okay, when you take a look at the publishing industry, there are the gatekeepers, right? the agent, the statistics, the marketing departments, the editors, the developmental editors, line editors, structural editors. Then there's the actual editor of the, the publishing house. You have all these jobs. This is a whole industry, basically. By self-publishing, you essentially are attempting, as a writer, you as a writer are attempting to replace an entire industry, right? So please just stop for a second and think, okay? Think, okay? You are attempting to replace a whole industry with your own self as the central management. You have now become the editor of the publishing house. Okay, that means you have a lot of responsibility to actually do the work, to do the job, right? But oftentimes, self-published authors, they take on so much responsibility, but they don't seem to realize it. So you have self-published books that have typos. You have self-published books that have awful structural development. Some of the worst structural development you have going to see. Exactly. You're going to see remarkably awful structural development or developmental editing, which is the most important skill in storytelling. In writing a book, developmental editing is the most important thing. If you cannot have a grip, if you do not have a grip on that, you're not going to write a good book, all right? So fundamentally speaking, a good author is a good developmental editor, all right? And so I really have been confused many times because I've had to put books down by self-published authors. There are exceptions, but those are, again, because there are exceptions doesn't mean suddenly the problem is solved. No, that's survivorship bias. Remember the first thing? Yes. Cannot build a philosophy or a strategy on the exceptions. You have to build it on the rule. Then take into account the exceptions. Okay? The exceptions are taken into account, but they are not the account. So, you oftentimes end up with a lot of self-published books, a vast majority being under-edited, overwritten, with awful characters. Terrible developmental editing. Some of the worst writing you will ever see. And they still go ahead and publish it. Because they have replaced themselves with the entire industry that was there to check and to tell them no. So you had a whole industry to tell you no, and make it difficult for you. But now you removed all of those. So you made it easy for yourself. But no, you shouldn't make it easy for yourself. You should make it harder for yourself. You should actually self-criticize more. You should critique more. You should listen to, you should have more beta readers. You took a whole industry, tossed it out the window. You better do the job. Okay? Exactly. You better do the job. Because you took a whole industry and you replaced it. You better do the job. You cannot do that without being ready to do the work. So we have a lot of self-published books that are actually awful and terribly written. But the indie authors or independent authors would love to say there are exceptions. They always love to point out the exceptions. Again, it's all built on the first one we talked about, the first toxic trait. All independent self-published authors have this thing where they're always just like, there are exceptions, there are exceptions. Have you forgotten the exceptions? I haven't. I know of the exceptions. Those are the exceptions. We need the rule. Why is the rule awful books? Because people don't seem to understand the responsibility they just took. By getting rid of an entire industry, you just took up a whole load of responsibilities. And I hope that you do the work. So, these are actually the several traits that I've come across that independent authors that seem to have. And I've mentioned problems. I've also mentioned the solutions. The survivorship bias, remember, never build your understanding of the world on exceptions. Build it on the rule. And take into account the exception. Do not make the exception the account. Step number 2, if you are going to look at the gatekeepers, please recognize that they actually offer and provide valuable service that makes, on average, traditional published books way superior to quality relative to average self-published books. And then you are going to have to take a look at the last point. And that point is very important. You took up a whole responsibility. When you are independent, there is a whole industry that you left behind that was designed as the back-end product, right? These are the toxic traits of indie authors. Hope you enjoyed this video. Tell me what you think down in the comments below. If you disagree with me, please let me know. And if you agree with me, tell me more of your ideas. I would love to actually have a conversation with you. Have a nice day.